Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about the film Bone Tomahawk. Bone Tomahawk is an odd mixture of two genres that you probably thought would never actually be mixed together. Now, they actually have been mixed together. I haven't seen any examples of it before, but they supposedly have been, both the cannibal movie and the western, to make a cannibal western. And Bone Tomahawk doesn't let one or the other completely take over the movie. Although it is more of a western, but most of the film is really more of a western. Very slow paced, but very old Hollywood studio system type of western, and then mixing into the gruesome gore that we expect from a deep, dark cannibal movie combined to make a very inquisitive and interesting watch of a western, more than we've probably had in a while. Most westerns now try to be very influenced by the spaghetti westerns or more audience friendly. I haven't seen a real interesting western like this in a long time. It's a western that kind of sneaks up on you as its slow pace and its interesting dialogue and its interesting characters slowly come up and surprise you. And as Hollywood western as it is, especially with Kurt Russell, it can still be very dark and witty and gruesome in parts that you really never thought a western like this could. It's a western that at the beginning you're not sure what it's doing, and as it grows on you, you realize how fully committed you are and into this movie you have become. Two drifters who are robbing some people and then are attacked by Indians. One of the drifters, Purvis, comes into town, buries something in a bag, and then goes to the local bar. The sheriff's deputy sees all this and tells the sheriff, and the sheriff comes to town and shoots him in the legs after a discussion. The sheriff being, of course, Kurt Russell. And he shoots him in the leg, brings the doctor, Samantha O'Dwyer, played by Lily Simmons, who is the doctor in town and has come to hopefully fix this guy's legs while he's in jail. But then, unfortunately, her, Purvis, the drifter who came into town, played by David Arquette, and another sheriff's deputy were kidnapped in the night by Indians, and apparently cannibalistic Indians. Other Indians stay away from, or Native Americans, I'm sorry, because they're so dangerous and don't even have a language. They're complete savages. And Kurt Russell's Sheriff Hunt gets together a group including Patrick Wilson, Matthew Fox, and Richard Jenkins, playing the sheriff's deputy, to go to these savages and get back Patrick Wilson's wife, who was the doctor, and the sheriff's deputy, and get revenge on them coming to town and kidnapping people from their small Old West town. And so they go on a journey of many days to try to get these people back. When I first started watching this film, I thought it was a little slow, and it took me a little bit to get into it. And it is a real slow burn of a movie, much like how old westerns were. That's one of the things I kind of wish we could get back to, more of the Howard Hawks kind of westerns. There's a lot more kind of character development in this than the old Hollywood westerns. It feels like they took out a gunfight or two to kind of like mellow it out even more, which can be a bit of a watch for a little bit, but you kind of understand what it's doing as it keeps going. As it was going, I was like, okay, I get this character development and such. Then when Richard Jenkins is talking to Kurt Russell about how he can never read his book while he's in the bath, I was kind of surprised by how interested it was in being relatable in that sense, but it became hard to watch as an audience member because you're like, wait, isn't this the cannibal western thing? And in some ways I kind of wish we didn't know as much as we do with this film. Obviously, you know early on that they're trying to find these savages and trying to get the troglodytes, as they're called, and trying to get these people back from the troglodytes. But it would be interesting to watch this film just thinking it was a western, and as it goes on be completely shocked by it. It's probably one of the few in the vein of classic Hollywood westerns that I've seen done from any sort of a modern director. This is S. Craig Zahler's feature film debut. He does a very good job, and he particularly got an amazing cast. If you're ever going to have a bunch of guys go on a quest to do something in a western, you better have a really great cast. If you look at any great western, the cast is always magnificent. And this cast is very, very good. A lot of people compare this to like The Searchers meets Cannibal Holocaust. That's kind of just picking the two most well-known movies of both genres. I still think it is very much a quest movie, a western quest movie. I don't really think it has that much to do with The Searchers. Certainly, like Patrick Wilson's character, Arthur O'Dwyer, does have kind of a single-mindedness, but I wouldn't really compare it to what happened in The Searchers. It's just kind of like an easy movie that you come up with when you think of that sort of thing. But it is a very good western search movie. The whole thing with its classic Hollywoodness, I think, very much works for this film. With Kurt Russell, who very much feels like an old school Hollywood kind of an actor. I love Kurt Russell. He's the reason you're seeing this movie. He's the biggest person on the poster, but also I think he's pretty much the guy who came off with one of the best performances in the film, as well as Richard Jenkins, who plays the sheriff's deputy in this. And him and Kurt Russell have such great chemistry together. I wish they starred in a couple more movies together. Richard Jenkins probably puts more into this movie than you really expect for someone like him to, but he makes a really compelling, interesting character, and more than just like the dumb sidekick. Richard Jenkins doesn't really think of him as a sidekick. He kind of plays into that a little, but he thinks of him more as a complete character, and you get more of where he's coming from and makes a more complete character. As well as Patrick Wilson, he's definitely the one who most wants to go on this quest to save his wife, even though he broke his leg earlier before the events that made them go on the quest happened, so he can't really travel that well, but he's determined to save his wife. Patrick Wilson was really good. I think sometimes you can think he's a little bland, but I quite liked him in this. And Matthew Fox, who plays kind of a dandy gunslinger who has a dark past, he was good. That Matthew Fox actually seemed to give a shit, which is surprising because I don't think I've seen him care this much for a movie in a very long time. But one of the things I thought that kind of held this movie back was the cinematography by Benji Bakshi was not really, I think, the greatest. He did a lot of wide shots. He did a lot of shots where I was wondering, like, why didn't they go into more mediums? Why didn't they have more coverage? I didn't think the way they shot it really worked for it. It's not that I hate the theory behind the cinematography. I didn't like the execution, didn't really work for the film. And for a film that's more interested in and is written like an old Hollywood Western, it definitely wasn't shot that way. It was kind of shot in more of a typical Western way, but even kind of poorly. I would say, honestly, that was one of the things that really hurt the experience for me was the cinematography, because it really wasn't letting me in. A really hard thing to get into this movie because of the cinematography. And it's shot in a very digitally way, which eventually kind of gets over, but at the beginning it felt a little too digital. Certain parts, like when you're so in it towards the end, I wasn't thinking about it as much because the story enraptured me so much, but it did feel like there was kind of a division. It was like hard to like get into, but the cinematography just really wasn't accustomed to this. And looking at Benji Bakshi's filmography, he hasn't really shot a lot of westerns, or anything quite like a western. I'm not exactly sure why he was picked to shoot this. I wish they'd gotten a better DP. I think that really hurt this film tremendously. There was so much going for it. It was kind of surprising that that just didn't really work for it. And when you think of a great western, to be honest, you do actually think of great cinematography, so it's kind of a shame that it just really wasn't shot up to the par that everyone else was bringing to Bone Tomahawk. But this is kind of like a deep cut of a film dork movie, because certain people like westerns, but you're kind of an older film dork to be into something like this. But for that, it's really, really good at that. I don't think we've seen an interesting western like this, but one that's just so interested in character. Most westerns, to be honest, were more kind of like morality, character study plays with a few gunfights in between. Back in old Hollywood stuff, before the spaghetti westerns really came in, people would talk about how all people wanted to see were the gunfights, but there weren't that many throughout. You're mainly like building up these characters, and so you will really care by the time they get to that gunfight. And Bone Tomahawk plays into that tradition, because by the time they get to the savages, you really care about all these people. You know a lot about them. It doesn't flow like a classic Hollywood film. So I think when I had seen the trailers and I had read things about it, the expectation, even though I knew most of the films all these people were referencing in their reviews of this film and such, it took me a while, because the flow wasn't what I expected. And the flow isn't like it's written. And it's written in the way that like no one in the West actually talks that way and such, but it's written in such a magnificent way. You kind of don't care and you go with it. In a Hollywood Western, you really wouldn't notice it as much. It's just this was shot in that kind of like, I guess it's because of spaghetti Western, but that everything's dirty, kind of like desaturated kind of a look. Not too much, but you know, I won't harp on that I don't like how it was shot excessively, but I didn't. If you are someone who likes westerns and you know who Howard Hawks is, and the idea of Kurt Russell in a western is the kind of movie that you would definitely see, I think this is a movie for you. But if you're not really as into westerns, I think this is for an experienced viewer only, because if you're not as into westerns, this is not a good place to really start. Not that it's a bad movie, but it's more of a film for people who know where it's coming from, and if you don't have the context, I don't think it would work as well. There's plenty of other great westerns you should see first. This film is closer to playing in the kind of Hollywood sandbox that a lot of those films are. And I see another film from S. Craig Zeller, who I think is an author, and I would like to see another Western from him, just shot by someone else, hopefully. And I love seeing Kurt Russell in a way. I love seeing Kurt Russell in anything. Kurt Russell has such a movie star presence to him. It is kind of like a John Wayne film where like all these other characters, their stories are almost more important, but you're focusing more on him. He knew exactly how to play this film. It's very often that when you see Kurt Russell in a movie, he has to play it in a way like he is self-aware on what the movie's doing, and a lot of actors are more interested in character and things like that. But Kurt Russell is probably one of the few actors who you really consider does like postmodern or self-aware meta performances quite frequently, and that he understands the kind of film it is. I don't think people give Kurt Russell the kind of respect of what he's doing, because he does that in a relatable way. A lot of people who do that, it's kitschy, it's fun, it's silly, it's stupid. But the way Kurt Russell does it, there's a real genius at work. I don't think people have ever really appreciated exactly what Kurt Russell's doing, from Snake Plissken. Well, basically all the stuff with Carpenter, Big Trouble in Little China. Even when I see him in, in an executive decision or something, it's like he's so aware of what kind of a film it is, but in a way that like you'll still root for him, like he's doing it in the traditional acting sense, and he is doing it in the traditional acting sense. Just like there's a lot going on in that brain of his that I think a lot of people will ever recognize. And Bone Tomahawk has that as well. Bone Tomahawk is a smart movie. It's a smart Western. It's a grown-up Western. There's a reason this was on VOD or day and date. It was in a few theaters, but I watched it on VOD. I don't think it's really an everybody movie, but for the people who get it and get this kind of a thing, they will get Bone Tomahawk, and it's a really rich experience. Despite its cinematography, I think this is a really great character building, old Hollywood type of Western, and we really don't get enough of those anymore. So if you have seen Bone Tomahawk and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.